everyone, welcome back. I'm Di, and today I am bringing you another installment of finishing the series. Today I'm going to be talking about two titles, the first of which is Twas the Night Before Christmas, which is the second in the Christmas Tree Farm Mystery by Jacqueline Frost. This was the Book One Cozy's Club bonus pick for December, and I will also be talking about A Shiver of Light, which is the 9th book in the Merry Gentry series by Laurell K. Hamilton. As a reminder, my finishing the series videos are potentially spoilery because I am talking about books that are sequels and further along in series, so I may talk about something that either happened in a previous installment or I may mention something about something that happened in a previous installment while I'm discussing these books. So if you haven't read these series, just know that going into it, I try not to be really spoilery, but I may touch on things that had happened previously if they are important to what happened in the installments that I am talking about at the time. Timestamps are listed down in the description box below in case you are only interested in one of these series and not the other. I do have short written reviews on both of these books on my blog and on Goodreads, so if you are interested in these series, my written reviews are always spoiler free, so go ahead and check those out. My blog is linked down in the description box below as well. So let's get into it. We'll talk about Twas the Night Before Christmas first. As I mentioned, this is the second book in the Christmas Tree Farm Mystery by Jacqueline Frost. In this one, Holly's friend goes out on a date which goes poorly and ends in a very public argument. The next thing you know, the date is found dead and Holly's friend is the main suspect. Not only because she was the last person to be seen having an altercation with this man, but because Holly's friend's bakery knife is the weapon. As I mentioned previously, this was the Book One Cozy's Club bonus pick for December. We had read the first book in this series, which was The 12 Sleighs of Christmas, in December 2018. And so we continued along with this installment. As far as I am aware, this is the last book in this series right now. I did listen to this one entirely on audiobook, which I borrowed from Hoopla, which is offered by my library. I enjoyed this one, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I did the previous installment. The way Holly acted in this one didn't sit well with me. She was very pushy in her investigation. She was also very stubborn. She received several threats during her investigation, trying to prove that her friend is innocent of this crime. And yet, even though she's told several times to leave things alone, she doesn't, and she gets into trouble. The way she talked to the sheriff when the sheriff was arresting her friend was not appropriate, and I'm kind of surprised that the events during the arrest occurred the way they did, because I get that it's a small town, but the things that she was asking for in regards to, like, favors, I guess, for lack of a better term, and how her friend was going to be taken to the police station and things like that, I thought was very inappropriate, especially because there's a budding romance between her and the sheriff, and it kind of made me feel like she was taking advantage of their relationship. But at the same time, she was very angry at him for even considering that her friend was the suspect, even though the murder weapon was from her friend's business and all of the evidence pointed to her as the only suspect. I kind of felt like Holly was trying to say, no, you know it's not her, so you have to look elsewhere. And I get her feeling that, but that kind of attitude just doesn't really fly in real life. So I didn't like that at all. There is mention of Holly's jewelry making business in this installment, and mention of how she gets lots of orders and she's having a hard time finding supplies to fill those orders. But towards the end of the book, all of that storyline kind of goes out the window. Like, if we weren't gonna like see how she handles her lack of supplies in regards to all of the orders that she has to fill, then why have that be a part of the storyline in the first place? I think was my thoughts on that. Like, it's mentioned quite a bit that she's getting several orders, yet she doesn't have enough supplies and needs to obtain it from outside of the town because her town has been depleted of what she needs, yet there's no real conclusion or anything further than the one time that she goes to get supplies, but you never hear about her actually making the items to ship out after that. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. Plus, something happens to her phone towards the end of the book, and it's like, okay, well, what happened to all of the orders you need to fill? Because it made it seem like that's where she checks her email, is on her phone. So little things like that bother me, but I'm sure it's not going to bother most people who read. But it's just something that's stuck out in my mind because I would be really stressed out knowing that I had all of these orders to fill and just didn't have what I needed to do so. But I guess because she is investigating this murder, and obviously gets herself into some trouble doing so. Like I said, she did receive threats along the way. I guess that takes precedence, and so we're not supposed to like remember, but it is something that stuck out in my mind about this story. I really enjoy this town. I love Holly's relationship with her parents. She seems like she's a really good friend, especially in the way that she is so vigilant about trying to find information to prove her friend's innocence, even though she puts herself in danger doing so. If you happen to go onto Goodreads and take a look at the summary there, it is wrong. There are things in the summary that are not correct. For instance, it talks about the murder weapon being a rolling pin, I believe, when that is not the murder weapon at all. It also talks about Holly's ex-fiance coming into the picture, which that doesn't happen at all in this installment either. So just know that in case you are somebody that reads summaries. But the rest of it seems to be pretty spot on. I'm kind of a little upset that there isn't another one and there's no real news about whether or not the author is going to continue this series, at least none that I can find. Throughout this installment, they are working on remodeling an inn that's going to become part of her family's like business, because they do own a Christmas tree farm and a little like bakery cafe, and now they're going to add on this inn. They do have several events that they run during the Christmas/holiday season, which they call reindeer games, and I really wanted to see how having the inn as part of their like holiday activities was going to affect or impact their business, because I think it would be something super fun in real life to like have a getaway where you could stay at an inn and have holiday events like, you know, snowman building and gingerbread house making contests and things like that. The premise of this just sounds like so much fun, and I'm kind of sad that we're not going to see that, at least not at this time. I would say that you should probably be feeling the magic of Christmas when you are reading this one, because of the way the story goes. I personally was having a really tough time with that this year, and I don't know if it was because I wasn't feeling the magic or the spirit of the season very much, that while I was reading it, it just didn't make the end of this book great. I think if I was, feeling the season and the magic of Christmas, that would have made a big difference to the way I feel about the ending of this book. Another thing that bothered me about this installment was that, as I mentioned, Holly and the sheriff kind of have a budding romance, but he is being very secretive with her through a lot of this book. And then when you finally find out why, it seems like the reason that he had this secret from her throughout, I'd say, half the novel was for nothing, because then all of a sudden the whole town knows about what he was keeping secret. And it was like, well, if that was the case, then why have all of that angst and secrecy and all of that? Because it was just for nothing. It was for nothing, and I dislike that. But yeah, like I said, I did enjoy this one, not as much as the first one, but I would definitely read another one in this series if it were to come out. And so those are my thoughts on 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. For more of my thoughts, definitely go and check out my written review on my blog, or you can check out the thread in the Mystery Madness Goodreads group, and some of the other readers' discussions and thoughts on this one as well. So let's move into A Shiver of Light, which is the 9th book in the Merry Gentry series by Laurell K. Hamilton. I first started reading this series in 2009, and I read all the way through until the 8th installment in 2011. So it's been 8 years since I read an installment from this series. At the time that I had finished the 8th installment, I didn't know that there was going to be another one. And I think it was last year that I had found out that a 9th installment was released. So since I had only one installment left to go, I thought, why not finish it out and have another completed series on my list. Merry Gentry, at the beginning of this series, is a private investigator, but as you follow the series, it turns more into not a murder mystery type series, but urban fantasy, I guess, where she is being more recognized as being the princess to one of the fairy realms, and her struggles and battles with her aunt and uncle, who are the current rulers of the fairy realms, as well as how her growing into her powers is bringing magic back to the fairy realms. So I really liked that aspect of this series, and that's what kept me reading it. In this one, and I had said before that there might be spoilers, so if you haven't read this series at all, or aren't up into this installment, there are going to be a little bit of spoilery talks ahead, so just know that before you proceed. But this one does follow the birth of Mary's children. We find out how that impacts her status as the princess of a fairy realm, what kinds of options she has in regards to whether or not she decides to take a throne, and her kind of rocky relationship with her aunt, who is the current ruler of, I believe, the Unseelie Court. I may have that mixed up, but I think her aunt is the ruler of the Unseelie Court. This also deals with something that happened in a previous installment regarding her uncle, who is the ruler of the Seelie Court, I believe, who raped her in a previous installment. I'm pretty sure at the end of the 8th book, and forgive me if I'm wrong because it has been 8 years since I read it, but I'm pretty sure we found out that Mary's children had different fathers in the 8th book. So in this book, we find out who the fathers of her children are. That's pretty much all that happens in this one. There's several mentions about getting the genetic tests to find out who the fathers of the babies are. And that's something that you don't find out until the very last chapter. Other than that, not much really happens in this one. Part of my enjoyment of this series was not only the things that had to do with the fairies and the fairy realms and the magic, but it also had to do with the mystery. And this one didn't really have much mystery other than who's the father of Mary's kids. There is a murder that occurs, but it doesn't occur till very late in the book. I would say maybe the last 4 chapters. Finding the killer was very quick. And the end was even more quickly wrapped up. I kind of feel like, for me, what I was looking for in this book was what was told in the last few chapters. I think this would have better served as a novella. Because of that, I kind of feel like we were just reading through a bunch of day-to-day stuff without having any suspense or any of that. And suspense is something that I look for in things that I read to keep my interest. But this felt a lot like what she was doing day to day, and not so much what was coming for the future or anything like that. She's pretty much set in her decision of whether or not she's going to take the throne, and we find that out early on in the book. But yeah, there's kind of a threat mentioned a couple times, but it's not really a big thing until the last few chapters. So I think that's also why I feel like this would have been better as a novella with just those last few chapters of this book. Also, there's something that arises in the same last few chapters that's not really explained well, and I have questions about it. And yeah, so now I'm kind of feeling like maybe I shouldn't have read this last installment. I was feeling pretty secure in my thoughts and my enjoyment of this series up until I read this one. And Am I glad I read it? Sure, I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I completed this series. Could I have done without reading this one? And I think the answer to that one is yes. I didn't really need to know who the father of Mary's kids were. I didn't need to know whether or not she has decided to take a fairy throne. This one deals a lot with the previous rape by her uncle, as well as him attempting to rape her a few times in this book, and I could have done without that as well. Things that happened at the end of this one were interesting to me, but like I said, I still have questions about something that was revealed in the last couple chapters. So yeah, I'm glad I finished this series, but now I'm kind of wishing that maybe I didn't read this last one. I do have fond memories of reading this series, and I do remember enjoying it a lot. So I don't think I'm going to let the fact that this last book was just okay hinder my memories of enjoying this series when I did read it the first time. That being said, I will probably be diving into the Anita Blake series relatively soon. I did read the first one in 2017, 2016 as a buddy read, but never continued because I just wasn't feeling it at that time. But I am definitely looking to read more vampire books this year. It is something that I remember enjoying quite a bit, and I haven't read a vampire novel in quite a while. And so, yeah, as much as I enjoyed this series about the Fae, I'd like to see what Laurell K. Hamilton has to offer in the realm of vampires. It is a longer series by far, her Anita Blake series, than this one. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. So those are my thoughts on these two series. Let me know if you've read them and what you thought of them. As I mentioned before, I do have written blog posts on both of these. They're just really short reviews, nothing spoilery at all. And also, if you're interested in other people's thoughts on the Book Wine Cozies Club bonus, or Was the Knife Before Christmas, you can check that out in the Mystery Madness Goodreads group link down in the description box below. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope you're all doing great. And until next time, take care and smile always. Bye.